بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونشكره على ما هدانا، ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المنتجبين. اللهم صل. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There is a hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir that I alluded to or referenced to it last week when we started our conversation about Adab as-Salat. أول ما يحاسب به العبد الصلاة. First thing that the servant will be questioned about is prayer. فإن قبلت قبل ما سواها، ردت رد ما سواها. If that prayers are acceptable, then everything else will be. And if it is not acceptable, nothing else will be. This hadith underscores the significance or the importance of salat, the prayer. A brief recap of few points that I began with last week. I mentioned that Salat probably the most significant concept that we have after Ma'rifatullah, and there are close to 98, if not over 98 verses and chapters or passages in the Holy Quran. And from our sources, we have close to 11,000 or close to 12,000 hadith that we have about the concept of prayer. The literature about Salat is extensive. Literally all Urafa, mystical figures, have written one way or another about Salat and its significance and how it should be performed. We have Marhum Imam Rahmatullah alayh, Asrar al-Salat, Adab al-Salat, Asrar al-Salat, Mirza Jawad Malik Tabrizi, again Asrar al-Salat. Marhum Das Ghaib has got Salat al-Khashi'een, and many others. One could literally trace this back up to Shahid Awal, Shahid Thani. These are people that have written about the concept of Salat. So that indicates that the significance of the prayer. The third and probably the most important aspect within this literature is the assertion by these scholars that, contrary to the average perception or comprehension, that they consider Salat purely in its literal sense, which would be of offer prayers in outside, in the daily prayers. In addition to the outward, purely the outward form of it, prayer also has what we call an inner word that we must pay attention to, interior meaning. And if we were to focus on the exterior meaning, we will lose what is the intent and purposes that wanted Salat to be performed. So in the same manner, I mentioned this last week briefly, in the same manner that the exterior form of the prayer, if there are some etiquettes and some conditions that must be satisfied, and I pointed out that you can go to your own scholars and Marja''s book and see what each Marja' considers to be as arkan, necessary to be followed, and outside the arkan, if not important or at least least important. But from if these conditions were to be violated, it would invalidate the prayer. The same thing according to ulama, that we have the mystical figures. If we don't pay attention to the interior meaning of prayer and interior etiquette and form that we really need to adhere to, the loss of the spiritual dimension could be incalculable, because inna as-salata mi'rajul mu'min, that salat is supposed to be the ascension to higher position, only happens when we pay attention to the interior form and the spiritual dimension of the prayer. There are a number of books, as I mentioned before. Out of these, I mean, I have 4 of them, but the 3 which I would recommend, at least they are simple enough for you to look at. One of them is a translation by a book of Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi regarding Salat, and it's called The Ascension to Infinity, literally as-Salat Mi'rajul Mu'min has been translated. So that's very simple book that you can read. And the second one is Salat al-Khashi'in, is in Farsi and has been, I believe, translated into English, which is available on either alislam.org or one of the pages. And the other one is The Secret of Prayer, which is by Ayatollah Jawad Amuli. These are 3 books which I recommend for at least studying purposes to become familiar. The Mystery of Prayer, or as-Salat, Marhum Imam, one of the books that he has written. There are 2 translations. The Ansarian translation, which is a very simple translation of it, and there is the translation by Naqvi, which is part of the modern Shia library, Imam Ali Foundation, I believe. This is extremely difficult and dense for people to understand, particularly the footnotes part of it. It's full of philosophical, irfanic, and as well as kalam and theology and so on. So it requires basic, at least, understanding of few things. Well, how do we perform prayer has been one of those people who have talked about as-Salat or have written about Salat. They have, particularly when they have focused on the inner meaning, the significance of how to perform prayer in a manner that not only is beneficial to us, but it is also acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the spiritual dimension. The outside, the exterior is not that difficult. You need to do your wudu, you need to face Qibla, and there are takbirat al-ihram until the end of the prayer, makan of musalli, libas al-musalli. These are things that we have it in our Risala Amaliyah. But apart from these, what do we have to do for our salat to be complete and to be acceptable by Allah subhanahu? Number 1 is hudur al-qalb, to be present, the heart to be present during the prayer, and we have the full attention towards Allah. This is Marhum Allama Bahr al-Ulum in a kitab, in his book in fiqh, alludes to this. عليك بالحضور والإقبال والصدق في النية. You need to be present, and also when your intention, niyyah, has to be for the sake of Allah alone, and you be truthful in when you say Allahu Akbar or whatever you say during the وصل بالخشوع والتواضع, that you need really to offer your prayers, be mindful of be humble, and be mindful of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah's majesty, and you offer trying to conceptualize this, how insignificant we are when we stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This feeling of worthlessness before Allah and in the prayer is something that we need to pay attention to. And inshallah, as we go around, all of these concepts have to be explained in more detail. In the past, we have talked about the fact that there is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wasalam alayhi that says that prayers are of 3 types based on the intention of the person who prays. Number 1, Amir al-Mu'mineen says the worship of Abid, or the worship of slaves. These are people that they offer their prayer, but primarily out of fear of Allah subhanahu. The second one, worship of the merchant. These are people that perform prayer, but out of expecting some kind of reward. So an exchange would take place. I offer my prayer in the exchange for some kind of reward in the hereafter. And the worship of the free, which is purely for God, not out of fear or desire for reward. This is the unique, only very special and elite are the ones that are able to do such a prayer. A little clarification. I have been told, well, if that's the case, Abid, as our servant, and the merchants are the lowest of the low, and we cannot reach the higher level, then why should we offer prayer? That's the question. The three types that I just mentioned, three types of prayer, should not be interpreted in a manner that leads to despondency. Because I'm offering my prayer out of fear or reward, then this prayer is not going to be accepted, then we don't offer at all. Even according to our ahadith, even if we perform our prayers out of fear, it's better than not praying at all. So it shouldn't be interpreted in a manner that because I am on the lower level of somehow offering or performing prayer, I shouldn't offer it. Part of the preparation. Now, to be able to focus during the prayer, there are some steps that we really need to take before even we start prayer. That is critical. In the same manner that before you start the outward form of the prayer, you need to go through wudu, a purification, and so on. The inward form of the prayer requires a number of steps to be taken so that we can focus during the prayer and perform it as close that we are capable of doing it. Number one, the part of preparation in physical, both applies to physical and spiritually, is to be ready to remove all and everything that might become distracting of our attention outside. So if we're going to start a prayer in a room, we remove everything around us that might be distracting our attention and taking our attention away. Some of it is to do with what our own feeling. There is a hadith from Imam Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi, says, لا صلاة لحاقن ولا لحاقب ولا لحاذق. The haqib and hadiq are people that are pressed due to call of nature. If one is pressed due to call of nature, you cannot concentrate. So you cannot enter the prayer, do your wudu, when you know fully well that your mind is somewhere else. Let me quickly finish this, I need to use the restroom. That kind of prayer is not acceptable. So you need to prepare yourself and get ready where there is no other distraction of your thought. And hadiq is the last one that covers most of our approach to the prayer, and that is that we are lazy. We don't feel ready, really energized for the prayer. This laziness, with the laziness, we approach the prayer, and as a result, we don't pay attention to what we say and how we can establish our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a verse in the Holy Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى. Don't approach prayer or performing prayer when you are intoxicated. Now, in the past, the literal interpretation of intoxication was that you are intoxication due to alcohol or something else. Now, scholars, intoxication could be anything that stops you from focusing. So laziness, sleepiness, and so on are part of the intoxication. When you wake up, immediately you don't say Allahu Akbar. you go through a particular, literally cleansing and preparing yourself to get ready for the prayer. I remember Marhum Shaykh Sad, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Sad, rahmatullah alayhi, used to sit on the sajjada for nearly half an hour before the prayer. And when students ask Maulana, why is this? He said, within this half an hour, I'm trying to detach myself from the rest of the world, push the world out so I can take step forward and offer. And my thought is, my focus is quite clear. We have seen other hadith that a few of them I recited last week, Imam Zain al-Abidin, that used to shake and out of fear when he stood for prayer and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And when Abu Hamza, I believe, one of his disciples, asked him, Yabna Rasulullah, why? He said, you don't know you are standing before whom? The azama and the majesty and the person that we are standing before, it requires one to understand how insignificant we are before him and how much we have to struggle to make connection. There is another verse in Surah Nisa 142, إن المنافقين يخادعون الله وهو خادعهم وإذا قاموا إلى الصلاة قاموا كسالى. This is that the hypocrites try to deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He is deceiving them. They stand lazily and to show off during the prayer. قالوا قاموا كسالى يراؤون الناس. So there is a concept of riya, which means the intention is not pure for the sake of Allah, and also they are lazy and they are sleepy. They stand there. We all wonder when sometimes, because we have repeated the prayer so many times, literally when we say Allahu Akbar, we really don't need to be even focusing on anything. Your mind could be miles away, but the tongue would go through the whole process, starting from Takbirat al-Ihram until we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Autopilot style. That is not the prayer that we need. It might remove taklif per se, that I have done a prayer, but Salat al-Mu'min, Mi'raj, ascension to heaven that is needed, it's not there because we don't make connection. We are present, but we are absent. Our mind is somewhere else. So there is another verse in the Holy Quran, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Wretched are those who are heedless or neglectful in their prayers. So we need really to pay attention. We need to remove all the external distraction. We need to also focus on ourselves to see internally what is it that might distract us, that we have to deal with them, and then try the issue of wudu. Some scholars, Urafa, they say concentration and attachment or remembering Allah starts from the moment you start your wudu. If the wudu is done proper, with the full intention and clear connection with Allah, that process moves forward. That's why we have a number of ahadith regarding dhikr during the prayer, during the wudu. But when one washes one's face, what should one say? When we wash our right hand or left hand or mash all these prayers, reminding us of we are moving or approaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, yes, but at the same time the most powerful, the remembering of azama and significance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah's preparation to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are few of the things that we need to remember, and inshallah later on when we begin to dissect each of these separately, the wudu from an irfanic point of view, takbirat al-ihram from an irfanic point of view, hamd and surah from an irfanic point of view, khushu' and khudu' before God's majesty is part of the whole thing. These are something that we will be able, inshallah, as time goes on, we will discuss it further. But please, if you have time, read, please, if you can do Salat al-Khashi'in, the Asghib Shirazi, which for our Persian speakers, the original book was in Farsi and it's ready available, and there are translation of the book by Yazdi and Amuli. These are books that are useful for preparing us and getting us ready for the conversation that takes place later on, inshallah. I'll stop here, then we can go on to address other parts next week. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.